What we are trying to do when we qualify is we're looking at ready, willing, able, and flexible.
Hello everybody and welcome again to the closing table here at REIPrintMail. My name is Scott Snofke. I'm a senior direct marketing coach here. I brought a good friend of mine in, Bobby Kough, today with the iBuySTL brand. They do a phenomenal job here in St. Louis with us. And to without further ado, Bobby, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty well.
All right, cool.
Well.
So what we're going to do today is just have a quick conversation, with the closing table is how do you get from seller, inbound phone call or cold call, you get from that point to qualifying the lead and going into figuring out whether it's a deal, negotiating with them, teaching them the process of potentially selling off market. So step one is the person calls you. How do you start into that lead and qualification process?
Yeah. So we look at qualifying a little bit differently than a lot of other organizations. What we are trying to do when we qualify is we're looking at ready, willing, able, and flexible. So at the end of the day, our lead managers aren't really focus on the asset quality initially, right? Really, we're trying to put them in a position where it's like, how can you get to know this seller? So we have a really defined sales process that alludes to that.
So you're looking at building like rapport.
Yeah, and we use trust. I think sometimes we're very conscious of our language, right? Like we've used rapport. Sometimes we feel rapport may be a little too surface level.
Yeah.
Right? Like the niceties of like, hey, how are you doing today? Oh, the weather, it's St. Louis, the weather sucked, right?
Right. Where'd you go to high school?
Yeah. So we try to take that, we specifically use the word trust because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get into a conversation and really learn about the seller.
Right.
As we kind of go through that process, we're trying to figure out that ready, willing, able, and flexible. Typically, regardless of the asset quality, if the seller allows us to have that conversation and they're not closed off, they're not combative through that conversation, usually we determine that, hey, there's a good probability that this person's going to be a good fit. At the end of the day, lead managers are really trying to get to a qualified yes or a qualified no.
Right. So then at the point of the qualified yes or the qualified no, how do you break down a deal financially? So in retrospect, say it's a ARV of 200,000, it's got 60,000 in repairs. How do you guys break that down? And what are you guys looking at to get out of the property? Do you guys wholesale or you guys do some fix and flips and buy and holds? What are you guys doing here in St. Louis?
Yeah, so we do a combination of everything. It's really property specific, right? If the asset comes about, we might have some ideas of what we want to do, depending on in St. Charles County, it's in Jennings, two different sides of the
one's
scale.
One's a buy and hold area, one's a good fix and flip area.
Yeah, so we'll look at that. Based on cash cycles, we would prefer to wholesale everything.
Right.
Like that's kind of our go-to. But, if a good opportunity comes about where we can wholesale it, novate it, fix and flip, it's really a combination of the asset quality and what's going on with the seller, right?
So you're evaluating each individual property as it sits and then combining the conversation that you've had and the rapport building and with the owner to justify that property, where it's going to fit and categorize that into where it's going to create profit for the iBuySTL brand.
Yeah, and term and really the seller focus is quite important because, you get a rock star novation, you go in and you have this mindset of, hey, I'm going to novate this, but the seller's like, hey, I only have a week, 2 weeks. That changes the game for you.
Exactly.
Right?
So you almost have a flow chart of, and if they do this, then this. And you just kind of work that property through and just kind of let the property and the owner tell you what you're going to be able to do with it with your knowledge.
And one of the unique things that we've done with that is our acquisitions reps, they don't make any of that decision. So we talked about, hey, how do we handle a lead if they're ready, willing, able, flexible? There is some price related stuff to flexibility. We go through a pretty specific price bracketing conversation.
Right.
If they come in and they're like, hey, the Zestimate is 180, which Zestimate in St. Louis is usually plus or minus 20K.
Fairly accurate.
Yeah. So they'll come in and they'll say, hey, I want 170. It's like, well, hey, that sounds like that's your ideal number. What is the number that, gets me punched in the face when I show up to the house? And it's like, oh, 170, that's it. That person's not flexible.
Right.
Right. Like there may not be, we don't want to take them out of the oven too soon.
Right.
Right. So that may be somebody that stays in lead management.
In a follow-up program.
Yeah. But once we determine like, hey, ready, willing, able, flexible, we go on the acquisitions appointment and our acquisitions guys, we have two different approaches or two different iterations of the business.
Right.
We have kind of our Mayo iteration of the business was in the past, and that was the max allowable offer where we're going in, we're calculating the numbers on the deal prior to, we're going in, we're just giving them that number that we have, that max allowable
Hard and
offer.
fast.
Yeah, so that was chaotic. Not an enjoyable time for acquisitions reps.
Right. Creates a lot more back and forth too, and a little bit more animosity.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit more of a pushy. In doing this, are you belly to belly, or how much of this is virtual? Do you qualify them virtually and then you set the appointment to go look at the property? How do you break that down?
So if they go through our lead management phase of the operation, which we call phase B, that's all virtual. We have American lead managers in St. Louis.
Right.
They'll call, have that conversation, and then ready, willing, able, flexible is determined. Then we schedule them for that in person.
Gotcha. And then it's more of a belly to belly approach. And
yeah,
I always like better, but it's a little bit harder to scale.
Yes.
I'm a very in-person person to where I want to sit down and talk and have a conversation, get a laugh, read your body language, to where over the phone is sometimes a little bit harder to build trust because,
Absolutely.
We all know that a lot of scams come from the internet, come from the phones, come from various sources like that. They don't literally show up in your living room. So I've always been a big belly to belly person, but at the same time, you can't scale that as easily because it takes time and effort to drive to the location and back. You lose time throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, when I was the sole acquisitions rep for kind of the first initial years of iBuySTL, and I mean, that was my biggest capacity suck. Do a time audit, it's driving, right? And you can only accomplish so much. And I was reading, dozens of audio books a month, right? Or listening to it.
Yeah.
What we have done though to kind of combat that is we do have a set criteria for virtual. So we are 95% in person, but that 5% that is maybe an absentee owner, we're not meeting the seller at the property anyway. We're meeting their brother who's opening. An acquisitions rep, when you run the numbers and look at our cost per appointment, an acquisitions rep's time is more valuable than going and talking to somebody that's not a decision maker.
Right.
So we'll run some of those virtual, and we've actually had a significant amount of success running the virtual model in Little Rock, one of our other markets that we're working in. So we're actually trying to figure that out right now. I think what we're going to land on is a hybrid approach.
Right.
The lead manager has the sophistication to kind of gauge what that person would want.
Yeah, the first level of qualification. It's just another level of screening to get to this point to make sure that you're a little bit more efficient, even though belly to belly works really well.
Yeah.
You're just cutting down every belly to belly. You're just pre-filtering them before you get to that situation.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense. Once you get them under contract, or is it something that you maintain that trust and that flexibility through the contract? So if they want to make changes, you're still open for conversations? Or are you one of those that, like, once it's under contract, no, that's it, we're settled on that?
Our approach throughout the entire process and really in this phase, because during this phase, once a property's under contract with us, that under contract time frame to close, in my opinion, that's when a seller is most anxious, right? Because you think about all the descriptors that random people have about home buying companies, right? Grandma house stealers, all of those things.
Well, and it doesn't help that the real estate commissions that are out there are fighting against. They're actively trying to stop it because it's competition. It's not that anybody's bad or worse, because we've all met people that are really good in their field, and we've met people that are really bad in their field. It doesn't matter what field they're in, you get both of those. So yeah, you're going to be fighting the conversations because everybody has a realtor. And I know I have 40 friends that are realtors, and all of them in conversations are constantly like, oh no, wholesaling's bad because it's competition. Of course, you're going to talk down to your competition.
Right.
So trying to get through that is always going to be a little difficult.
Yeah, so we maintain that same relationship first mentality on that back end of the process, right? The hope is during the appointment and going through all that we built enough trust that the solution that we've offered is the solution that best fits the seller. They've agreed to it. They're good to go. We've noticed that since we've started doing that, the issues that we've had on the back end are slim to none. We also, when I was talking about the Mayo approach, we've also moved to something that's called lowest acceptable offer. And what that allows us to do is to fulfill very, very high percentage of the commitments that we make. Right. Because, we're usually getting the properties at a deeper discount, and that allows us to have more flexibility on the disposition side. Right. So we fall out of less deals.
Right. You have more active cash buyers that you can fit into their buy box.
Yeah, it's better for the seller, better for us reputation wise. But in terms of flexibility, again, we hope that we built the trust and they're agreeable to everything we've done. We don't ever pressure them to sign a contract. But if sellers come back and they're like, hey, we've had this happen actually recently where a seller's like, hey, I could be out of the house. We already have it sold. We're ready to go. We want to close on it this month, right? We're month to month, quarter to quarter business. Well, the guy's like, I was in the hospital and I got to extend closing. So now that revenue is going to hit in September for us.
Do you feel that approach better represents your brand as you guys are pushing, and you guys brand yourselves extremely well? I mean, everywhere you look, you'll see it. You'll see some billboards. You'll hear radio commercials, stuff like that. So you have a very stout brand in the St. Louis market. And inside of that, Do you feel that that approach best represents the brand, or do you feel that the approach would be slightly different if you were unbranded and just, Joe Buyer down the street?
Yeah, I mean, I think the brand forces you to be accountable.
Right.
Really, right? So like, if you're trying to build a good brand, I mean, we've always, from the day that, I started with this operation, the goal is to be the good guys in real estate.
Right.
Right. We've heard all the descriptors that we just talked about. We've heard all the negative things said about wholesalers. I think from our background, being military guys and all that stuff, it's like we're really high ethical, guys, and we want to brand ourselves as the good guys of real estate. So, we've gone through, and we actually spent last quarter about 9 hours doing this, and we went through our entire seller journey and we audited it. It was like, hey, what is not in line with that brand, right? So like at the end of the day, we kind of landed on our mission as iBuySDL is to get a seller from a place of overwhelming anxiety to a place of hopefulness and excitement. And if there's anything in the way that we contact people, the way that we talk to people, what we send out, our commercials, if there's anything that is not aligned with that, it's out.
Now, do you feel that branding yourself that tight and following that code of conduct, over the course of time as it gets out there, does that generate a positive lead flow of word of mouth?
Yeah, our referral percentage has definitely gone up. The lifetime value of a customer in our industry is usually one, maybe they'll have a cousin or an aunt. But the more people that wear our shirts when we give it to them or just talk about us, oh, I had a great experience, do a video testimonial for us, we're able to get in front of people that otherwise, not saying all wholesalers are bad, otherwise they might get in front of somebody that may not handle their situation as ethically.
Well, I really appreciate all of your input today here at the closing table. It's always a pleasure having you in office, so hopefully we can do a few more of these, and we'll catch up next time. Appreciate it. Thanks, boss.
Yeah, man.